Ladies and gentlemen, today is a big day, as we'll be talking about Pokemon Black 2 and White 2, which, as you saw in the title, happens to be the game I'd nominate for the best mainline Pokemon game to date. Objectively speaking, that is. And today, we'll see why that is. As the title of these games would suggest, they are sequels to Pokemon Black and White. You heard that right, not a remake, not a third improved version, but an actual sequel. So with the intro aside, your timestamps are on screen, so now, let's talk about the Nintendo DS's final Pokemon experience being the 12th mainline games, Pokemon Black 2 and White 2. First up, I want to discuss the regional Pokédex. As the games prior specialized in only using their new Pokemon, these games actually address the design decision that they made in Black and White 1. In those games, you could only ever have the new Pokemon introduced in Generation 5, effectively 150 Pokemon during your main playthrough of the game. However, now in the sequels, they actually doubled the Pokédex count to the highest number at the time, being 300. Which of course improves the diversity among the Pokemon in which you'll be able to see and battle with. Sadly, 3 of these Pokemon are completely unobtainable without external means, 3 of which are also event exclusive, and 35 sadly have been reserved for post-game. Although there are some exceptions, as a few can be battled during the main story, so technically they have an exception despite being small, allowing for a grand total of 259 Pokemon that you get to play with, which even after the math is still the most at its time of release, which instantly means there's more replayability. But here's the kicker, there's also exceptions to the exceptions, but that's niche and will be talked about later. But on the note of Pokemon, a couple of them actually got new forms. First up is the box art legendary Kyurem. This Pokemon got 2 new forms accessible via Pokemon Fusion, but here Kyurem's stats change aggressively to make it a bulky offensive menace for either physical or special purposes. For the first attempt at Pokemon Fusion, you can tell the execution was odd, considering it gets its exclusive attacks by replacing other moves rather than just learning and forgetting them like we saw with the Rotom forms, for instance. The next new form is Keldeo. No stat change, no ability change, just a cosmetic change via Knowing Secret Sword. Finally, a fun one, being the Therian forms for Tornadus, Thundurus, and Landorus. These forms can be manually changed via a key item, only accessible via external means, but the changes here are pretty nice. Big stat changes and a different ability, allowing for each of the Pokemon to play differently despite having the exact same move pool. The odd thing is that you cannot actually trade the new Therian forms, which actually makes it impossible to get the item required to change the forms. With those being the Pokemon adjustments, let's discuss the region, which has also been reforged, meaning back to Unova again. This time, the linearity issue people had with the Unova region, surprise, has also been addressed, and with that said, let's talk about the new region layout. Similarly to Kanto's second appearance in Gold and Silver, the Unova region got a pretty hefty overhaul in terms of play space from its previous iteration, but this time for the better, with some small removals and cuts in various parts of the world, Route 10 and Challenger's Cave being removed, as well as parts of Victory Road and the Relic Castle being trimmed down. But in return, we get access to roughly 25 new areas in the game. Yeah, that's a pretty big number. And with this, we're granted plenty of side areas for both the main playthrough and post-game alike, which is always a fun sign. The way you approach it when playing in the game has been changed for the better as well. So let's speak on the progression now. Similarly to the originals, you begin in a corner of the map, in this case, the bottom left corner. And once again, you go towards Pokemon League at the top of the map. But things are a little bit different, as the first portion of the map is separated from the rest and covers the early game, being the first 2 gyms, while all being completely new areas. The mid-game plays similarly to Pokemon Black and White, covering the trips from Castelia City all the way through Mistralton City, being gyms 3 through 6, with some small adjustments. And of course the late game being radically different, as instead of going through Twist Mountain to reach Opelucid City, you now visit the right side of the map to Reversal Mountain and go through the former post-game area from Black and White 1 during the main playthrough, while also traversing new areas alike, with a few exceptions where the locations can actually change a bit during the main playthrough that are not just tied to the seasons or version exclusivity. And as for the post-game, the map on screen will assist with that, as the post-game areas are all over the place. I think it's a goose chase to find them all, which of course is always thrilling. So for a final question before moving on to the actual gameplay, how are the HMs in these games? Sadly, 2 of them are actually mandatory to beat the game, being Surf and Strength, which is a little upsetting for needing to force set attacks into your team somehow, but thankfully Cut is not one of these mandatory HMs, so honestly, it's still a win. But with that said, let's move on to the fun gameplay shenanigans that the gameplay provides. Alright, first up I want to speak on is some gameplay changes that I was not able to include in the black and white video due to time constraints, as of course they apply here as well. So, just note these also appeared in the previous games. Up first is the status conditions. A poison Pokemon will no longer take damage while you move on the overworld, which is just lovely. But sleep on the other hand was changed just for this generation, and would be reverted back to its former glory whenever Pokemon X and Y would release. But this change messes with the sleep timer, as when you switch out a sleeping Pokemon has spent at least one turn sleeping and then switches out of the battle before waking up. If they did so, they'd have to repeat those sleep turns the next time they switched in, which was dumb, and it made sleep far more potent than it should have been. Also, for some numbers discussion, another Generation 5 change comes to the EV system, as now whenever your Pokemon gains enough EVs for a bonus stat, those stats will be applied automatically instead of needing to wait for a level up to gain said stats, which means you can actually respec the stats on a level 100 Pokemon. Also, Pokemarts just don't exist anymore, and now they're just in the Pokemon centers, making life significantly easier. But with that said, that's all the stuff I skipped but wanted to speak on. So now, let's talk about the new stuff. First up is a new move items option directly from the Pokemon menu, removing far more downtime by speeding up how fast you can menu your items that are currently in use. Also in the PC, the multi-select actually returns after being previously absent. Pokemon breeder trainers can actually be rebattled every time that you enter and leave a route to grind EXP and money, which is a neat inclusion despite the fact some breeders are just in obnoxious positions. And the most convenient addition, a text box asking you if you want to use repels again, because actually going to the bag to use repels in the first place took way too long. So now we have an excellent time saver. But speaking on the bag, we got a new section called the free space. This extra line in the menu has nothing in it by default, and by going to any item in the bag, you can move that item here, serving as a shortcut that allows you to find certain items faster, like potions, repels, or the bike if you're feeling quirky, which is a really nice feature. The Pokédex got a new menu as well, which allows you to look at each area of the region and see what Pokemon can be found there, within the grass, water, and of course by fishing, which makes completing the regional Pokédex seem reasonable for once. Speaking of Pokédex completion, these games finally decided to give us actual rewards for doing a completely dreadful task. So what kind of rewards? Well, you get access to a new location with a shiny Pokemon in it that you'll just ignore, and 2 key items with passively powerful effects, increasing the appearance rate of eggs and shiny Pokemon respectively. Meaning now you're actually incentivized to complete the absolute insufferable task that only a psychopath would do. No silly, I didn't complete the Pokédex once. I did it twice. But now it's time we discuss the game's difficulty, because things get a little interesting here, as the game itself is actually not bound to a single difficulty, because these games actually have 3 different difficulties built into the game itself, being normal, easy, and challenge modes. We can talk about how to unlock them later, but as for now, I have to elaborate on what the difficulties actually change. So the normal mode is surprise, the normal difficulty, and the one intended for you to play on initially, and is the standard difficulty to compare the other ones to. Easy mode takes the normal difficulty and molds it into an easier experience by lowering the levels on trainer teams while making the trainer AI worse to make this a very beginner-friendly experience. But on the other hand, we also have challenge mode. This difficulty takes the normal mode and cranks up the difficulty, of course, to match the name challenge mode. The changes brought include increased levels on trainer Pokemon, of course making issues for the level curve, better performance for trainer AI, and as for the gym leaders, they actually get an additional team member, as well as an extra held item for one of their Pokemon. They even get better movesets and, of course, levels. Again, the Elite Four and the Champion get a similar treatment, but now all of their Pokemon have held items that are capable of changing the tide of an entire battle. Meanwhile, the Elite Four members get an extra team member. All of the gameplay you've seen throughout this video, it was all played in challenge mode. The big thing to remember about challenge mode is the increase in levels for the extra difficulty, as again, it causes big issues for the level curve as the gym leaders feel like actual boss fights, but on the other hand, wild Pokemon become a little criminally underleveled. And with that said, let's talk about the level curve, which thankfully can be summarized with the Ruby and Sapphire issue, aka a wacky late game level curve. So where does the issue begin? Well, it's after beating Skyla and reaching Lentimus Town. This stretch of wacky leveling goes all the way to Opelucid City, but more importantly, it's gym, as the gym leader's ace will jump up 9 levels, so it begs the question of how did they assist you in this grind? Well, they didn't, as roughly only 5 entire battles are even mandatory to reach the gym from Reversal Mountain. For a level grind that steep, 5 is just not gonna cut it. Again, I know there's a bunch of optionals, some of them that you have to go the entire wrong way to find, but just remember optional trainers are important, but the mandatory ones are even more important. I mentioned Ruby and Sapphire earlier, and this is a discussion I cannot wait to have in that video as well. But this is where the level curve gets odd, because after beating Drayden, the level curve's actually good for the rest of the game, as the level difference with Marlin is actually pretty good, and it actually stays that way through the end of Team Plasma and Victory Road. So how's Black and White 1's biggest issue? Well, the post-game level curve is better, of course, as normally you end up beating the game around level 59 or 62 in challenge mode. Now, as you move on to the post-game, trainers are fairly more on par with your levels, and as you go deeper in some post-game areas, you'll even see a bit of an increase, which is good progression. The regular grass is never a concern for levels while also just being higher in general, and the doubles grass hardly goes up in comparison, overall making the post game far more tolerable. And yes, that does include making the super bosses in Elite Four Round 2 a little bit easier to reach, but there's more that'll play into that with the in-game content discussion. But with that said, shall we proceed to the game's features? So, beginning with the features, let's talk about returning features, and then just slowly transition to the adjusted stuff and, of course, the new content. Let's start. Returning from Pokemon Black and White 1 mechanically unchanged are the Battle Subway, the Battle Institute, the Pokemon Musical, Pokemon Transfer, and of course the Elite Four Round 2. In terms of returning features that have been reworked, first up is the Intro Link. Basically provided a major overhaul as it was essentially a minigame hub, but it required you to have another player. Now that requirement is gone and serves as an excellent grind for items. And the other change comes to the version exclusive town. So in Black 2 there's Black City, and in White 2 there's White Forest. Basically these places lose their unique features, so they're similar to each other as they support a shop that gains more items as you progress through parts of their new battle facility. Speaking of which, let's finally talk about the new content. So on that train of thought we were just on, first up is the Black Tower and White Tree Hollow. While different in name, they serve the same goal, a battle facility that actually feels like an expansion on the main game. So to explain that statement, you're able to bring 6 Pokemon with no restrictions, and you can still earn EXP here, but the thing is you're not able to heal as you go through a labyrinth-like play space, as you battle trainers in order to find the gate trainer that'll allow you to battle the boss and clear the challenge. The thing is though, you're not able to heal in battle or the overworld, so HP management is very important, so the only way to heal is to beat a doctor, which they can only heal you once. Overall, this challenge is surprisingly fun, as the levels of the Pokemon feel like a natural follow-up to the main playthrough, and the chaotic nature of the later levels having more than one floor for you to explore make it feel a lot more complete and fleshed out. But the best part is the fact that there are actual rewards for playing through the towers, as yeah, there's minor rewards, but upon beating all 10 of the challenges you get rewarded with a shiny Pokemon holding an EXP share. Dude, that's an awesome reward. I guess the shiny Pokemon is cool as well. But back to new content, we have the Pokemon World Tournament. This facility boasts 8-person bracket-style knockout tournaments, offering the 4 battle formats while making you battle the characters from the other Pokemon games that you've enjoyed up to this point. It's the gameplay everyone ever wanted before Pokemon Masters took the idea and ruined it. But at least the Pokemon World Tournament actually rewards you with battle points. But with that note, the added rewards to the battle points redemption pool feels a little excessive, so they brought back the pool of battle-oriented held items from Black and White 1. But for some reason, they added a handful of TMs in here for seemingly no reason other than begging you to play the new feature an aggressively high amount of times. Why am I just gonna sit here and farm these battles for the Protect TM when I could just trade it over to Black or White 1 and get it stupidly easy? With one tangent aside, let's go straight to another, because the next feature has an annoying pace-breaking tutorial shoved in the game for no reason. Yep, I'm talking about Pokestar Studios. This detour allows for you to make movies and yes, actually get to follow a script. All around, it's a fun time when the game is not forcing you to do it. right, but you're even able to unlock a new entry animation for your Pokemon. Yep, another animation that's not the shiny sparkle, almost like that gift Zorua you get before the 5th gym. Oh, is it time to explain that? Well, as mentioned by the guy who gives you the Zorua, it's one of N's Pokemon. Yeah, that N. And as such, it has a few quirks. First, the entry animation, the fact that you're not able to name it, and of course, as it's a Pokemon that's not yours, you get an increase in earned EXP. But it makes you wonder, is this Zorua the only example of this? No. In fact, with the next feature we'll go on about, you can unlock more of them to find in the wild, all of which are based on N's Pokemon from his teams before the end game, all of which have those bonuses that the Zorua does. But let's talk about that unlock method now, being the next feature, the Unova link. This main menu option allows for your copy of Pokemon Black 2 or White 2 to connect to another copy of the game, Black 1 or White 1, or the Pokemon Dream Radar app for the 3DS, providing the game with extra content. Linking a game to Black or White 1 will give you access to the extra pool of N's Pokemon, as well as story events that you're able to witness, battles against the rival teams from the save file used, based on the starters that that save file picked, as well as some characters and other parts of the game referring to the trainer of that copy of the game by name, really allowing the game to function better as a sequel. Connecting to the Pokemon Dream Radar will allow you to send in items and Pokemon to your game, allowing for access to the Therian forms of Landorus and friends, or extra hidden ability Pokemon like the Spiritomb or Slowbro you've seen throughout the gameplay, all with levels that scale based on your game's progress. Or finally, connecting to Pokemon Black 2 or White 2 will allow you to send and receive the keys for the key system. This lets you change multiple parts of the game just from the main menu, by either switching between Black City or White Forest at will, or the ability to change the door in which you need to use to get Regice or Registeel, and for changing the game's difficulty. The last option being the rough one, as to get the keys for the difficulty options, you have to beat the game first. Then you can unlock the key tied to the game and then send it off. Seriously, in Pokemon White 2, you unlock easy mode after beating the game. What is the actual point of that? And if you want to play Black 2 on challenge mode, not only do you need to beat Black 2 once, you also need a second copy of the same game to send the key to, as you can only send the key obtainable in the game to the game you're sending it to, making for a mess of a system that massively hurts a damn good feature. Thankfully on emulator, you can just bypass this pretty easily with cheats. Listen, I got lucky when I decided to use White 2 for the footage, because if I had reset Black 2, which thanks to having the shiny charm I refused to do, I would never have been able to play through challenge mode for this video on cartridge. With that headache aside, another new feature are the medals. They're basically just achievements like you'd see in games on other non-Nintendo systems, but that's just about it. Which leads us to the last feature being Join Avenue, which replaced the route gate on Route 4 with an empty lane that you get to turn into a thriving society, packed down with shops, able to speed up friendship gain, selling items, or giving stats for your Pokemon, or even leveling them up. But to build your utopia, you gotta wait a day for NPCs to spawn, or you can communicate with other players to build the shops and recommend those shops to the people visiting it, as that will allow your buildings to level up and provide you with better purchases. Ultimately, an interesting time sink with some nice payoffs. See, it's almost like this was an actual good feature that they wanted to do again, and then tied basic online features to it to make that attempt worse. Nah, I'm just imagining that. Also, post-game super bosses exist to a greater scale. Cynthia returns with another team rework for some reason. Culver's even gets a post-game rematch where you can earn another Master Ball, and N as he gets to use some nice weather teams. But alas, that is all for the features that tie these games together. In this section, we'll be covering a few minor notes that easily could have been excluded, but I felt they were worth mentioning as these minor differences did improve my time with these games. First up is the music. While most of it is reused from the very positive experience the Black and White 1 soundtrack was, these games somehow managed to not miss at all. Every single new music piece is either good, gooder, or great. Across the whole thing, there are no glaring examples that scream bad, which totally makes up for them removing Route 10 from the soundtrack. Okay, but now I get to speak on the visuals, which obviously the games gave us some new set pieces, but this is not what I'm trying to focus on. Oh no. The UI is what I'm looking at, because in these games, the menus actually have different coloration depending on which version you are playing. Battle screen, Black 2, White 2. The Pokédex itself, Black 2, White 2. The screen showing the location and season, Black 2, White 2. It's just nicer to see the version exclusivity extend to more than just the trainers or the wild Pokemon, because even during during the main playthrough, even parts of the game are different. Moving back to gameplay stuff, Reversal Mountain's layout is a little bit different depending on the version. It's not just a visual change. See, here is the entrance to this room in White 2 has this dead end right by the entrance. But meanwhile in Black 2, the exit is a straight away from the entrance to said room where that wall was supposed to be. Another odd thing you may have noticed is the puzzles in the Plasma Frigate during the main playthrough have a different order depending on the version. In White 2, your first trip is the password and card puzzle. Meanwhile, your second trip, you have to do the warp panel puzzle in the room with the funny walkways. Now in Black 2, your first trip is actually the warp panel puzzle. Meanwhile, on the second trip, you have to do the password and card puzzle in the funny walkway room. It's just a nice and hardly noticeable change between the versions that at least changed the gameplay up just a little bit. Now, while we could look at other examples like the different versions of Route 4 or the free shiny Pokemon from the Black or White battle facility tied to the game being played, but I've honestly said just enough mentioning them right now. So with that said, we have one last thing to talk about. How they ruined the game by fixing the rocks in the Iciris City gym. Thankfully, they gave us a broken grass tile to replace it. Yep, time for the story. As the story in these games are not typically regarded as the best mainline stories, like the originals are, we're gonna avoid a play-by-play of what makes it good and get more to the point with a summary, as I don't want this to be another 40-minute long video. But before we begin, as stated in the first section of this video, this game takes place 2 years after the events of Pokemon Black and White, and as such, the world and the people have changed quite a bit, and we'll see just that. The game begins with you taking control of a new player before the usual happens, by requesting you to complete the Pokédex, and then you never do so as your actual goal is to beat the Pokemon League like every other game to date. Wow, who would have seen that one coming? But the main conflict and plot of the game revolves around you stopping Neo Team Plasma. Essentially Team Plasma, but also out for revenge because of their skill issue in Black and White 1, as they're actively against their former leader N, who has left the region for 2 years at this point. And now these guys work under Getsis. Despite most of their army essentially being gone, which actually allows the Shadow Triad to do things this time around, but Neo Team Plasma works pretty well as an evil entity, for a few reasons. The big reason is their goal to take over Unova with force, and they don't hold back with this as they try to freeze over the region by using the third legendary dragon. Seriously, after this event in Opelucid City, good luck getting back into the mall. You're not changing your Rotom form. But the big reason is conflict, because to assume all of Team Plasma is evil again would be wrong. And as such, there's a group of ex-Team Plasma trying to atone for their sins in Driftville City, while also being led by one of the former 7 sages of the original Team Plasma. At the climax of the game, it's actually really nice to see them standing up and fighting for what they believe in, as it's exactly what N would have wanted them to do, even if they were passive for the entire game. But they're not the only force challenging Team Plasma this time around, as your rival is absolutely determined to crush them. So how is the rival? Well, despite being a friendly rival, at least to you, to Team Plasma, he's very much the opposite, even referring to them as trash at times. Well, he's fueled by revenge, as 2 years ago, according to the game, his little sister's Purloin was stolen by Team Plasma. But as a kid, he couldn't do anything about it, which leads him to revenge in an effort to correct an issue that he could not even prevent in order to get that Pokemon back for her. It's actually really compelling motivation for a Pokemon character. He's even gifted some interesting interactions with the ex-Team Plasma guys as well, since they did help to cause the issue that is his motivation. All while he's supporting you, that he'll be able to succeed in the end as you help him stop Team Plasma, in which he does, which ties up his character arc pretty well. Now as for returning characters, N comes back at the game's climax in order to stop Getsis, but he falls into a trap as Getsis was wanting him to show up to get the legendary dragon by his side to make Kyurem change forms for his plans. But even after Getsis fell in battle, N still wants to reason with him, even if his former father's acting like a newborn. But after the main game, you get to battle him in the ruins of the Team Plasma Castle, where he, with his legendary Pokemon, gets to deem you worthy as the new hero as you get to catch the legendary later. With his final words, however, wishing you the strength to build the new world where people and Pokemon can trust each other without the need for Pokeballs. And then, he begins his quest to find your trainer from the last game, to say thanks. Now, while there's a lot of returning characters, we're only going to briefly speak on one of the former rivals of Black and White 1. As Bianca went off to become the professor's assistant, there's not really anything else much to say about her, leaving us with Charon, who took over as the first gym leader. Sadly, there's not as much to his character this time around, but at least he does help in fighting Team Plasma, showing that he's still willing to help defend Unova. Also, there's this new guy who got to take over Team Plasma for one battle and then instantly failed and left. But one question remains. What happened to your old character? Well, we don't really have a true answer, but it was said during the main story that both legendaries had left the region, meaning that this character is gone. But in the post-game, going to their house, we get told what they were last doing, and that was to find N. Now, as for the main game, that's it for the story. But through the Unova link, we get more story to the other characters in the game to explain what led them to where they are now. But honestly, it's just reasoning for the changes to the gym leaders, Alder not being champion anymore, or explaining why N had completely different Pokemon on his teams in Black and White 1. It's just extra goodies that you may have questioned at one point as a reward for playing both games. But with that said, this critique has reached its end, so let's put the final toppings on this cake. Pokemon Black and White 1 were already great games, but here we are given direct sequels that manage to improve on most of, if not everything those games did right. Improvements down the board with quite an increase in content, but still kept the great improvements while improving on the quality of life stuff while also adding rewards for just playing or doing stuff in the game. See, personally, these are not my favorite games, but they pack way too much to say they're not objectively the best. So let's wrap this up right now. Pokemon Black 2 and White 2, I give a 7.9 out of 10, the current peak of the mainline Pokemon games. Now, do I recommend these games, despite 97% of what I've said in this video being positive? Well, of course, because it provides the overall best gameplay and bang for your buck with actual polish attempted that others kind of forgot to do. And with that said, ladies and gentlemen, if you've enjoyed the video, leave a like and subscribe, as both of those help the video immensely. But more importantly, leave a comment down below, because I would love to hear your thoughts on these games. And with that said, next, we return to Generation 1. Thank you for watching, and have an excellent day.